Hello there, reason people, PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. And today I'm just going to go over the kind of flow and some of the logic which is built into the Generative project which I released the other day. This project also I've uploaded online, so in the description you can see that for the download link. But I thought if I go over the flow, it'd make a little bit more sense. I know you can follow the wiring, but there is actually quite a bit of wiring going on all over the place, and it might be just easier for me just to give you a quick overview and to go through, as I say, some of the logic which is going on. The first thing to bear in mind when running this particular project is you've got to run it with a very small buffer size. I'm having to use my DX driver at the moment because I'm using OBS, and that's how I want to put sound into OBS. That's what I happen to do. So I've turned off the rendering audio to the audio card buffer size, so it forces Reason to work in 64 blocks. Or 64 buffer sizes, most effectively, that's what it's doing. So just bear that in mind. If you have it at anything higher, then what's going to happen is it's going to be very out of sync and it's just going to sound quite horrible. It's quite a biggish project, as you can probably see, but at the same time it's not like massive. So you can actually, there's only a few instruments really playing. In the middle is the heart of the project. I did do a little LFO review. If you haven't seen that, I'd recommend you actually go and have a look at that, purely towards the end, even if you know it, little LFO. But towards the end, I actually start to build this bit of stack up. I build this stack and I start touching on the bass over here. So you might want to have a quick look at that. But this is the heart of the whole of the Generative project. This is selecting the sort of notes which we're playing, and this is my pulse or gate information. So just by turning off the gate, we can actually make everything silent. In fact, that's how you start and stop this project for the musical side, and you have to obviously start the transport to get the bass and the other stuff working, bass and drums. So quick basic flow of this is obviously we're randomizing the notes which are coming down. Now the randomization of the notes tends to be working a lot faster than the actual pulse, which is no problem because I've built myself a simple little sample and hold. This information is obviously then passed down to this stack here. Yes, I could have used a janitor over here to start transposing or moving the CV signal up, so it would have been in roughly the right sort of scale. But here we go, we're using a transpose to move it all up. So there's obviously some free players which would do the transpose if you don't have the note view. I just happen to like the note view a lot more. We're coming through a first scale in chords where I'm only literally using the scales, and I've got a second one down here, and both of these are actually randomized, so these are actually in sync of what they're randomizing, and really the randomization on the scales and the key should be slowed right down. It's going a little bit fast, but yeah, that's something I should have maybe done. It's slowed right down. But anyway, after we've gone through the first one, so we're getting our single note. So we've obviously randomized, come through, we've got a single note. We're going in, hitting our first MIDI CV converter, and this goes off to my bass, and it's also going off to the piano. Right below it, I've got another MIDI CV converter, and this might confuse people, but I'm using the note data, but I'm in mono mode. So with poly, you've got to go from poly to poly, and if you flip it into mono, then this allows me to obviously, in this particular mono mode, you can go into the back of instruments because most of them are actually in the mono mode, and I'm actually just using that note data to make some decisions on the bass, which we'll look at that logic a little bit later. Then I am actually going through another scales and chords where I am actually generating a chord. That chord is going off to the pad sound. And then obviously it comes down to it makes the little arpeggiated sound. As I said in my little LFO video, I did go through the setup of this sort of stuff. So as I say, that is the heart. I suppose the next bit of logic to go from there would be to go over to the bass. So this is actually the bass stack, and so is this bit here. So the bass is just happens to be doubled up. The first thing I'm doing with this bit of logic here is quite straightforward, because obviously I'm doing randomized notes. Some of the notes are actually playing just that little bit too high for my liking, so with this simple little if statement within Delta, I can actually just transpose these notes up here, obviously down whole octave, so they're now playing lower. So just try and keep everything a little bit lower. got a simple sequence going, and it's actually got two different patterns. All the difference really is in the pattern is really more at the end. One's doing a little run down, one's doing a little run up, and that's being decided on some logic further down here. And the logic, I've got one note coming in and I'm delaying it. So this is a delay splitter to go through my sample and hold device. So what that allows me to do is I can hold my previous note while my new note comes in to base some logic on it. And the logic simply is if my new note is higher than my old note, then the chances are the next note's going to be lower. And if the next note's going to be lower, I make sure I choose the bass run, which is going to have a run down. And if it's the other way around, so if my new note is lower than the previous note, then the chances are it's going to be higher, so we have a bass run going up. Of course, this is totally randomized, and there's a lot of cases where the note would just keep going down and down and down. It is totally randomized, but there's just a bit more chance if this is lower, then it's going to be higher, than if this is high, it's going to be lower next time. So it's just a simple little bit of logic which I've applied there. And as I say, I'm just then taking that data and put it into the second bass. Nothing special about the second bass at all, just apart from this a little LFO which is running. And that maybe if you haven't quite twigged on to this particular project, it's apart from the piano sound, everything is running off little LFOs to do all the VCOs and everything. Over here is our piano, so we have a single note coming in, and I'm just going to scroll it over here because I double up, because you hear that piano sound and then you hear the echo of this other instrument here. These instruments are quite heavy, and I've got a few of them which are quite heavy, and you might want to replace these out if your system is running a little bit sluggish with this particular project, because it is quite a biggish patch, that one. But if we quickly just have a look at the logic here, I've got a number of chance gates. So we're taking that single note, we're taking a chance, or which route are we going to take. I've got different delays going on here, which then goes off to another chance switch, and I'm either transposing the note up, just playing the note, I'm taking the note, and then I'm actually echoing the note several times, and same here. And yeah, so it's taking different routes all the time to get the piano sound, and which is on the sustained, so it's obviously sustained notes here. And then I just outputting it to the second one. And the second logic, I originally had this patch over here, but it just didn't sound right at all. Once I've come through this logic and gone up to this one, that delay has a 1 bar, so that's why this one sounds for a bar. This is delayed it for a bar, and then it repeats whatever that's done. But I'm using the auto latch obviously to shorten the notes down, so we can just get some, and that's on the randomization as well, to just picking slightly different length notes, and that's just a little bit of randomization there. Now I'm going to go back a second, because this is the piano, and there is a connection with the arpeggiated sound which is going on, and that is also being controlled by a Morphix. So if you can notice, I've got it slightly over this side, which means I've weighted it more towards the piano than the arpeggiator, and basically we're fading out, like the piano itself gets faded out ever so slightly, but the arpeggiator sort of sound gets faded out a lot more. And so there's just a little sort of, it's just a sine wave, and that's what this one here is doing. So wherever this line is, this is what's happening to the fader. It's just smoothing the faders, or should I say, sorry, it's moving this Morphix in this particular case. So there's that little bit of logic there, just to give it a little bit of movement. That's purely there for movement. And finally, right over the other side, we should have our sort of pad sound going on. I've got a random LFO again coming into here, and this is controlling the manual gate if to turn it on or off. I use the Generatives a lot, and I'm going to do another video on this because I'm going to demonstrate how you use a random signal and you can make it weighted for your logic process. So there's a weighted logic process on if this is actually going to be selected or not. I'm also using another little LFO on the same wave to do the panning of this particular mix channel, and then between these two mix channels I've got another one which is actually in the back end. I could have used Morphix again, which is probably more sensible, but I'm actually moving the faders. there's a sine wave which will actually be moving these faders, but I've set it up in a way that it's unipolar. So this is actually the minimum it's always going to be, and now it's going to actually mix in that particular way on this particular device. And I don't think there's any other kind of logic going on in this one. That kind of, well, probably there's all sorts of things going throughout. You may notice a number of the MIDI outs floating around, and that's all for the Magic program. So in that Generative project, obviously I've built up some graphics, and I will touch on Magic at the very, very end of this presentation. So let's whiz all the way over and actually have a look at the drum stack. So I've got 4 random LFOs here. They're off controlling things like the density on the beat map. I'll put this in a combinator because I'm moving the position. Obviously I can do that on the back, but I wanted to be able to actually see this move. So I'm using that randomization, which is doing that, but I'm also taking CV data and I'm using delta as a logic gate. And I'm probably do a separate video on how to use and the pros and cons of probably using delta as part of a CV stack. So I'm using this as a logic gate. I've got a number of different logic states going on. In fact, I've got 3 different zones. So two different if statements will give me 3 different kind of zones. And what I mean by zones is this one's actually looking at, say, between 0 and 50. We're going into, sorry, the MIDI scale here, and then from 50 to 100, and then I've got another one from 100 to 127. So I've got a randomization process going on, and if that's hitting, depending which note it's hitting, depends which zone we're going to end up going down. And what these zones are really doing is, one will be working out if we turn the beat map on and off. If the beat map's off, then we choose pattern number 2, which is obviously selected here. If it turns the beat map on, it selects pattern number 1. And then there's another one which will select pattern number 3, beat map will be off. And there's another extra bit of logic at the top here, which is looking for a bit of randomization at the very, very, very high end. And if that hits that, it will actually, effectively, it takes a fader right down. So it takes the piano, the strings, and the arpeggiator. So you are literally left with the bass and the drums only. And that's what this bit of logic down here is actually doing. So this is what this is doing here. And as you can see, that's what the CV is for. So yeah, so we've got that bit of logic going on there. Now we can come over to the drums. There's nothing special in this particular drum section because this is all to do with creating the different snares and stuff. We do have another little bit of logic here. Again, as you can see, it's totally randomized. I'm using a bit of a weighted system again to work out what to do. And all this is doing, this is only moving the faders ever so slightly. And the faders in this particular case are 100% the bass, the morphics here, and the strings. So they're the ones in graphite. And it's also moving one of the drums. I can't remember which one I wired it up to. I think it's one of these 2. I did have it on the drums originally, but I didn't like the way the drums moved in and out. I felt like, no, the drums had to stay stronger. And as I say, they're only subtly moving them. They're not like doing big ones like this one here, pulls the fade all the way down, what we're doing. But with these ones here, it's just slightly moving them. Again, it's just to give the Generative just a little bit more of a random kind of feel. You could push these up a bit higher, I think, and I could have got away with it. But if you go too high, then it just sort of loses it. So again, this is to do with my Magic program, because again, with that delta, it's sending the signal over to the Magic program as well, over to this particular combinator. Probably am, but yes, I'm going through all this sort of stuff as well to work out what. So let me go back a step because I'm rushing ahead here. So in Magic, I had my keyboard is playing their keyboard. If I'd wanted, because I'm doing a mute here, they carry on playing when you can't hear the pianos and everything else going on. So the logic tells this to change the MIDI channel here. So it's changed it to MIDI channel 16. So the program's Magic system to MIDI channel 16, which hasn't got it's not wired to do anything on that channel. So the keyboard is all stop whilst it was obviously in that quiet period, and when they start playing again, then they start playing again, or you can hear the music, it starts playing again. So that's all this logic's doing, was tying that up. This bit of logic did catch me out very briefly. It caught me actually in the combinator. The simple reason is everything's offset by 1. When you're looking at MIDI channels, in the combinator it goes from 0 to 15, where obviously we all know MIDI channels go from 1 to 16. So obviously 15 there is actually channel 16, and as you can see I've got MIDI channel 4 here, and I have to have it set up as 3. So it's just offset by 1, but it's just something that caught me out when I was sort of doing my logic, thinking, what's going on here? What's going on here? And that is really basically it. As I said, it's quite a straightforward kind of project. There is obviously a ton of wiring on the back of how everything's sort of hanging together, but a lot of it is just sort of getting your MIDI data around, and there'll be a whole bunch of stuff obviously which is actually wiring up these particular devices, because I'm using LFOs to drive all the sounds apart from the piano sound, so there's a lot more wiring than normal. So you might, as I said, you can easily sort of swap these out if your system is struggling. So I know I do have a high-end system, and I know when I've done my mini modular series, I released a number of patches. I noticed a guy commented he's actually even having troubles running one of the patches on his system, which is something I probably didn't think about, because I was running like 10 or 15 patches at the same time without any issues. But yes, they are intensive. CV is intensive because CV, once it's going, it doesn't shut up, so it just nicks that DSP. As I say, I've got quite a good system, and you can see really down here my DSP is already on 3 bars, which is quite high for the system. So I'm going to have a quick look at Magic. This is the graphics program I use. It's something that they actually work on all the time. There is a demo version, so you can obviously download the demo version and see it working. I would highly recommend the Performer version over the standard, because obviously you can load up MIDI files, audio files and other things, and you can produce high-end videos with that. And obviously we can do real-time stuff as well. So let's very quickly, where's my cursor gone? I'm on the wrong screen. Let's very quickly have a look at Magic. This is Magic itself. The input source is obviously quite a good place to start. I happen to have my audio coming out of Reason, looping back on itself, and so I can bring it straight into Magic. Obviously, if you're on the PC, you can load up something like Loop MIDI and create yourself your own MIDI ports. So actually in Reason, I've got them MIDI output devices, the EMIs, and you just assign them to your MIDI channel and the MIDI port, and off you go. You can add your own MIDI files and WAV files. You might even be able to do MP3s. There's quite a selection of things that you can actually load up. So you can render stuff, as I say, into a proper movie. So movies you're actually seeing on the screen at the moment, they're obviously rendered in 60 frips. And obviously trying to do them live, it just wouldn't really work, because it's quite intensive. Obviously Reason's quite intensive in that is, so for them projects I had to turn Reason off. So here we are back in actually in Magic and its main screens. So it's very easy to use, it's all object orientated. You just start adding things in. So if I was for now just quickly add in, say, something like a spectrum. So there is a spectrum of my music going on. I can at this stage say to it, right, actually I think I'm going to scale that, so we can obviously grab that and we can scale it different ways and all the rest of it. We can say we don't want them big bars, we want something different. We can make it sort of rounded. So you can do a few different things with that. The way this works, it's great. Obviously, you can right click and do that, but you can also, they've got other functionalities like when you actually write, and I like this in programs where I can actually come in and I can say, actually, I didn't want that. I'm going to replace it with something else. In fact, actually, I'm going to replace it, say, with something like a waveform. So hey, so now I've got myself a little waveform going. I can make that waveform circular. And where the functionality comes in really great, I might say to it, actually, I want that circle only to appear when my kick is going. And I can do that. I can actually come in here, I can go down to my sources, I can go down to my drums. I know what drum note my kick is on, so I can just come into here and say, right, here we go, I'm going to use the C1, so that's what my kick's going out on, and I'm going to use the velocity. So whenever it kicks, we're now going to get ourselves a circle. We can change the colors, as you can imagine. And again, we could change the color, say, based on the volume. So the volume level is now going to decide what sort of color schemes that we might want to look at. And it's like this, and you just keep building it up, and you can do sort of crazy things with it. Some of the effects I really like the trails and the blurs and that sort of thing really do give this, make it a bit more magical. And there we go, we're starting getting it to look a little bit different. Obviously, like I say, I'm going to grab all these and copy these. I'm just going to paste them down here. And I could add that straight onto there if I wanted to. And let's grab this, let's put this over here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to transform this. And let's translate this, let's move this. I'm going to move this over to the left a little bit, and then I'm going to move it up a bit. And then I'm going to scale it right down, so it's like that. I'm only interested in the circle, say, and because of the brightness and that, I'm actually going to select my drums again, and I'm going to put them onto something like the snare. So if I was to select that, we can get it to only appear on the snare. And I'm going to do the same with this one here, because then it makes it looks a little bit more solid. And you know, as I say, this is what it's all about. It's just having a little bit of fun. And it would help, obviously, if I had actually had a bit of a snare probably running at this moment in time. And then we can go still do sort of crazy things. So I'm going to actually take that and add another effect, kaleidoscope. Let's kaleidoscope it, and obviously we can really ramp it up. I'm just going to take off the moment so you can actually see my snare having an effect if I want to have an effect, or I could bypass that kaleidoscope altogether. And there's my snare coming in. If I put it on top here, it'll appear on top, might make it look a bit clearer. And then yeah, and you just go on and on and on. You know, I might say, hey, let's start to rotate this. So what I'm going to do this time, rather than having it say rotate into the volume, I'm going to turn that say off. And under here, I'm going to pick a ramp. So there we go, I've got myself a ramp. I can speed it up, I can slow it down. In fact, I'm going to scale this right down. And then what I'm going to do then is, and in fact, let's stop that colour so make that, yeah, I might show this now a bit better. And what I'm going to do now is we can go and do some really silly things with it. I want a star field. So we could have a star field going. And if I make that probably about 2, let's make that 2. Let's have the size quite a bit bigger. And we can have it rotating slightly differently. Slow that down a little bit. And I say, and you know, there's nothing stopping us sending CV via the MIDI out, and we can bring that in to control things as well. But as I say, you just start building things up and just really having fun with it, and this is how simple it is. You can also have things like the movies and all that sort of thing, so you can load up movies. Again, on some of my other projects, there's actually movies playing in the background, and I put them on top of a box. The little men I was playing around with, they were simply made up from using something called some cubes. So probably was using that one there. So I was using them cubes, and that's what I was using. Very, very quickly, let's. Yeah, so there's our cubes. That's what I was actually using, and you just sort of start scaling them, and so we can scale it different ways. Yeah, And that's how I made my leg and, you know, the arms and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's great, a bit of fun. And in fact, my piano keys on the keyboards which are playing, they're actually made out of this shape as well. They have a polygon put on top as well, because when it goes into 3D, they were losing a bit of colour. So yeah, as I say, this is not meant to be a heavy thing about Magic itself. This is more of, yes, we can use Magic, we can integrate MIDI, we can integrate other things. Oops, where's that shaders? Shaders are really good as well. So shaders are very tiny bits of code, real tiny bit of code behind this, but it's making full use of your graphics card. So you've got to have quite a good graphics card. And some of these parameters can be changed, and you could even sort of hook it up to something else coming into it, and it'll actually can affect the speed and things like that. Some shaders don't do absolutely anything whatsoever. Yeah, and you've got just like loads of them, so you could have that in the background, and we could put that one on top. In fact, you can see my frips have suddenly really dropped right down. What did I disable to turn this all off? I just unplugged it all, didn't I? That's what I did do. So yeah, let's plug that back in. So yeah, so as I say, it's just all great fun. Yeah, and I'm going to leave it at that. I think it is a great program, and to me, obviously, it's worth it. And when I'm doing generative stuff and playing around with this, obviously, you can get this stuff doing its own thing based on what you're doing as well. Anyway, thank you for watching, and bye for now.